doctors who'd treated him had urged the authorities to ban the funeral or at least ensure the casket was closed, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. None of the clerics in attendance wore face masks, nor did Montenegro's Prime Minister-designate Zdravko Krivokapic, who enjoyed Amfilohie's patronage, and some mourners kissed the bishop's head or hands. The scale of the event reflects the enormous influence of the Serbian Orthodox Church in Montenegro, but the country's coronavirus infection rate is already among the highest in Europe, and doctors fear this funeral will make matters worse.
Guy Delaunay reporting. 2 companies have had to pay close to $400,000 after a workplace accident in which a man's hands were seriously burnt by chemicals. The 2 Hamilton companies, Perry Metal Protection Limited and Total Access Limited, have been fined and ordered to pay reparation after a WorkSafe prosecution. The man badly burnt his hands after disassembling scaffolding that had been set up next to a tank containing caustic soda. Vapour had risen from the tank and condensed and settled on the scaffolding. That's the news.
Kia ora, I'm Nikki Mando, and today on The Detail, New Zealand's accident compensation scheme was a world first and stopped people suing. But it's so good that it's now unfair.
We need to step back and say it doesn't matter what the source of your disability is, you should be entitled to the same healthcare treatment and rehabilitation and physiotherapy and have that all organised for you on exactly the same basis.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Today, I will outline the Cabinet of the new Labour government. The Cabinet will have 2 overarching priorities: to continue our health response to keep New Zealanders safe from COVID-19, and to drive our economic recovery and ensure we take the opportunity we have in front of us to build back better. In the lineup I'm about to announce, you will see a greater coordination around the management of each of those areas, with both an enhanced and coordinated health team, making use of the talent we have in our caucus, and a senior and coordinated economic team. Alongside that, I'm excited to be bringing in some new talent, with first-hand experience in the areas that we will be working on, and reflecting the New Zealand that elected us on the 17th of October. First, though, I do want to acknowledge that forming a government in the midst of a global pandemic creates an absolute focus on the enormity of the task in front of all of us. The world is in a situation we have never seen before. The UK and Europe are re-entering lockdowns. Daily case rates are back to the peak seen in the first wave, and recent cases at our border show we aren't immune to what is happening in the rest of the world. The challenge of COVID-19 will be with us for many, many months to come. It will not be easy, but we have the team to continue taking on that challenge, and that is what you re-elected us to do. So let me crack on and share some of the details of the team with you today. As Prime Minister, I will remain the Minister for Child Poverty Reduction and Minister for National Security and Intelligence. I have reallocated the Arts, Culture and Heritage portfolio to Carmel Sepuloni, but I will keep an associate role and will pick up the role of Minister responsible for Ministerial Services. Kelvin Davis has been re-elected Deputy Leader of the Labour Party with the strong endorsement of caucus. But as he shared earlier today, he has made the decision that he does not wish to be the Deputy Prime Minister. Kelvin shared this view with me before the election. I asked him to reconsider and to take some time and wait for the outcome of the ballot before making any final decisions. More recently, though, Kelvin has again confirmed his view. I respect his decision. Kelvin reminded me recently that his driving force in Parliament has been twofold. He wants to improve outcomes for Maori and will do so in his role as Minister for Māori Crown Relations Te Arawhiti. He also has a significant passion for ensuring that our families are safe. He will take on the role of Minister for Children, with responsibility for Oranga Tamariki. He will also remain Corrections and Associate Education Minister. Now to the Economic Recovery Team. Following Calvin's decision that he does not wish to be the Deputy Prime Minister, I've appointed Grant Robertson to that role. He will continue as Finance Minister. He will also pick up infrastructure to drive the ongoing work needed to roll out our historic $42 billion investment into our country's infrastructure to create jobs and build back better. He will retain sport and recreation and pick up racing. As Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister and Infrastructure Minister, Grant has been given the seniority and portfolio mix required to drive our economic recovery. I'm excited by the opportunities we have here. It will be hard, but the legacy that we can leave the next generation and the way we choose to rebuild is immense. That's where our next Minister, Megan Woods, comes in. She remains the Minister of Housing, overseeing our extensive build program, as well as energy and resources and research, science and innovation. She also picks up Associate Minister of Finance. She will be a key part of the team looking at ensuring a renewable energy future as part of our rebuild. I expect she will also work closely with our Minister of Climate Change. David Parker continues as an Associate Minister of Finance and remains Attorney General and Minister for the Environment to continue the much needed work on RMA reform. He picks up revenue and a newly named portfolio of oceans and fisheries. This is an excellent fit with the existing environment portfolio and will give us a chance to take a clear focus on issues around sustainability and abundance in the fisheries space. Stuart Nash has been given a suite of portfolios focused on supporting economic activity in our regions. He will become the Minister for Economic and Regional Development, Tourism Minister, Forestry Minister, and retains small business. Stuart holds a passion for small business, is a minister based in our provinces, holds a Master's in Forestry, and a clear eye to the needs for a strong economic recovery in our regions. Considering the importance and strength of our primary sector to our export-led recovery, Damien O'Connor will pick up trade and export growth to continue our pursuit of quality free trade agreements, including with the UK and EU, as well as retaining agriculture and the rollout of our plans for primary production as captured by Fit for a Better World. Carmel Cepoloni will continue in social development, and the employment portfolio will be rolled back into her work. She will also keep ACC and disability issues so that we can continue to improve the interaction across these different areas. She will also take on the primary arts, culture and heritage role. As I have said, our ongoing response to COVID will be a priority for this term, and there are ways we believe we can improve our response even further. Chris Hipkins picks up the new portfolio of Minister for COVID-19 Response, which will draw together responsibilities from testing to managed isolation, border management, right through to details like flights carrying returning New Zealanders. He has done an outstanding job to date, and I have every confidence he is the right person to lead our ongoing response work. This will also ensure continuity in the response. Alongside this role, he will continue with his education and public service portfolios and as Leader of the House. Andrew Little will become the Minister of Health. It has become clear to me over the past few months that the major health reforms we need to embark upon cannot be carried out successfully by the same person managing the day-to-day of COVID. Andrew will ensure we continue these reforms, but also ensure that the remainder of the health system and the New Zealanders that access it are getting the services they need and deserve. It will be a big piece of work, and he will be assisted by a team of associate ministers. Penny Henare moves into Cabinet and will be an associate minister responsible for Maori health. He retains whānau ora and also an associate housing role focused on Maori housing. He will also, at his request, become the Minister of Defence and has strong links through his family into that area. I have also made the decision to bring in Dr. Aisha Verrall directly into Cabinet as another Associate Minister of Health, with delegations for public health, as well as picking up food safety and Minister for Seniors. It is not without precedent to bring new members straight into Cabinet, and in the middle of a global pandemic, I believe we would be foolish not to use the considerable expertise that Dr. Verrall brings in infectious diseases into our response. On to other key appointments. Nanaia Mahuta will become our Minister of Foreign Affairs. She brings the experience of being an Associate Trade Minister in the last Cabinet. She is also the first woman in our nation's history to hold the portfolio. She will hold on to local government, continuing the work started on Three Waters, and she'll also pick up an Associate Maori Development role. Portal Williams moves into Cabinet and will become the Minister of Police and Minister of Building and Construction. She will also take on an Associate Children's role, given her experience in child protection issues, and will be supporting Minister Davis. Chris Farfoy retains immigration and broadcasting and media, but picks up the justice portfolio. Willie Jackson moves into Cabinet and will become the Minister for Maori Development, an area which he holds considerable passion for. Jan Tinetti becomes a minister and enters Cabinet as Minister of Internal Affairs and Minister for Women, along with Associate Minister of Education, where she will utilise her schools as a past primary school principal. Former Whip Michael Wood becomes a minister and enters Cabinet as Minister of Transport and Minister for Workplace Relations and Safety, an area he also has a background in. Kitty Allen becomes a minister and enters Cabinet as Minister of Conservation, Associate Environment, Associate Arts, Culture and Heritage, and Minister for Emergency Management. Kitty brings with her huge energy, talent, and a background in law and huge enthusiasm for environmental issues. David Clark re-enters Cabinet with the roles of Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, the new consolidated portfolio of Minister for Digital Economy and Communications, also covering government digital services, statistics, and Minister for SOEs. Ministers outside of Cabinet include the following: Orpido William Seo as Minister for Courts and Pacific Peoples. Mika Whaitiri returns to the Executive as Minister of Customs, Veterans, and picks up the position of Associate Minister of Agriculture. She will also have the specific role around animal welfare, something that's long been called for the return of. She will also work alongside David Clark on the considerable data issues and data sovereignty issues that we've been working with Māoridom on in the last term. Phil Twyford will be a minister outside of Cabinet for Disarmament and Arms Control and Minister of State for Trade and Export Growth. He also picks up 2 associate roles. Priyanka Radhakrishna joins the Executive as Minister for Community and Voluntary Sector, Minister for Diversity, Inclusion and Ethnic Communities, and Minister for Youth. As previously set out, James Shaw and Marama Davidson are Cooperation Agreement Ministers outside of Cabinet, and we will also have 2 parliamentary Undersecretaries. Reno Tirakatene will be Undersecretary to the Minister for Oceans and Fisheries and Minister for Trade and Export Growth, focused on Māori trade. And Deborah Russell comes in as an Undersecretary to the Minister of Revenue. This is a refreshed lineup that focuses our most senior and experienced ministers onto the most pressing issues facing our country, while bringing forward and rewarding and acknowledging the talent that exists in our caucus. There are 7 ministers new to Cabinet and 6 ministers overall who hold a ministerial warrant for the first time. I'm excited by this team. They bring experience from the ground and from within politics. We know we have a big job ahead of us as New Zealand continues to respond to some enormous challenges. But the commitment this team has to the task is absolute. And now, it's time to crack on with it. I'm happy to take questions.
When Minister Hooter picks up foreign affairs, how did you come to that decision?
Actually, for me, it was a natural decision to take. Nanaia has, in the course of the last term, held an associate trade role, which has given her experience in that area. I've seen firsthand the relationships that she formed through that role. She is someone who builds fantastic relationships very, very quickly, and that is one of the key jobs in a foreign affairs role. You only need to look at the difficult work that she has had to conduct over, for instance, her local government portfolio. And that, to me, demonstrates those diplomacy skills that we need to represent New Zealand on the world stage.
I'll let
you finish your question.
Is it clumsy to have a Minister of Health and a Minister responsible for COVID-19?
No, not at all. Look, the delegation for a COVID-19 response includes everything from the Ministry of Business and Innovation for quarantine, transport and civil aviation, customs and MPI. What wasn't working was having a single person in one delegation. We need to bring together a coordinated approach. He will bring in the job that had previously been done by Megan Woods. Also, it has been recommended to me by the likes of Sir Brian Roche that actually these roles should be separated out. We need an absolute response and focus on COVID, but we also need an absolute focus on our health reforms. This will now allow us to do both.
Phil Twyford being demoted from Cabinet?
Actually, Phil has always been an amazing team member. You know, and he himself will acknowledge that in some of the portfolios he's held, we haven't been able to make the progress that he would have wanted. However, at the same time, I would not keep him as a minister unless I believed he had something to offer, and he does. So I'd have to say that he has been quite remarkable about it.
Why has Phil Twyford been so magnificently demoted?
Well, look, as I've just said, both he and I would acknowledge that in some significant areas, particularly housing, we haven't made the progress we needed to. That is not to say, however, that he does not have a contribution to make. He does. My decision around reallocating economic development was primarily I wanted that to be held by a minister in provincial New Zealand. And so this is why I'll be using him in other areas, but he does still have something to offer this team.
David Clark, how did he earn your trust back?
Oh, well, ultimately, you're keeping in mind that although there were issues there, he was still a minister presiding over what has been ultimately a successful response to COVID-19. On this occasion, my view is that we've given a better match to his skill set in areas where he has enormous value to add, particularly in the space around growing the digital economy and digitising the public service.
How did Jenny Salisa take the news that she wouldn't have a role as a minister?
Yeah, well, Jenny and I have spoken together and agreed together on new roles for Jenny in the next term of Parliament. So she's looking to take a different direction. I should add, presiding officers, we have a role of nominating there, but we will be nominating as Deputy Speaker Adrian Rurafe. We will be nominating as an Assistant Speaker Jenny Salisa. So she'll bring that support role into the presiding officers team. We also have a view to have her supporting some of the Select Committee work as well in a lead role.
Jan Tinetti is relatively unknown in the biggest scope of things.
Not to the education sector.
Do you think she'll be a good fit for internal affairs?
Yes, absolutely. And look, and she will hold a considerable associate delegation for education. Jan is well known in that sector, has done fantastic work directly alongside Minister Hipkins in the education space. She brings her experience as a past primary school principal, has a passion for things like alternative education, where she'll be working as an associate minister. And across those internal affairs areas where you've got things from everything from national libraries to fire and emergency, she has excellent skills that she'll bring to bear in those areas.
Does light rail sit under the infrastructure portfolio or the transport portfolio?
Oh, of course. That's an area where we want greater coordination. So whilst it sits under transport, we will have a coordinated infrastructure team focused on delivery of some of that $42 billion worth of investment. So I expect that Michael Wood will be working very closely with Grant Robertson.
And why
Given the current state of Oranga Tamariki, what do you hope Calvin Davis achieves being in charge of that as a Māori in charge of Oranga Tamariki?
I think for both of us, actually for our government as a whole, we had over the course of the last term been working very hard on a very different direction for Oranga Tamariki. Calvin expressed a strong desire to be involved in continuing to take Oranga Tamariki in that direction. We know in particular we need to do better by our Māori children and whānau. That's an area where we've already moving into the space of having whānau ora more closely involved with Oranga Tamariki. We wish to continue that ultimately so that we can see better outcomes for children, and that's what he's focused on. I'll come to you, Ben, and then back to you, Toba.
On foreign affairs, how do you expect Ngānia will take to the role in comparison to Winston and a Labour foreign affairs minister in comparison to a New Zealand First foreign affairs?
Look, every individual, regardless of their political party, brings different strengths to a role. What I, of course, am very mindful of is regardless of who holds it, I will always work very closely with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I have an excellent working relationship with Nanaia, and I know that we will work incredibly closely and well together to advance New Zealand's interests. In fact, as a team, we will be working with Damien O'Connor, who of course is advancing our trade interests in that area. And Rino Terakatene, as Undersecretary, has a background in Māori trade promotion, and so we'll look to bringing that expertise into the team too.
Can I also ask you?
Toba.
There's a lot of, it's an incredible cabinet reshuffle. There's a lot of fresh blood in here. Do you have any concerns about experience in the cabinet?
No, not at all. You do see in reshuffles often the opportunity to bring new people in. We were offered that opportunity by the fact that, of course, a number of ministers are no longer in this parliament. But you'll see, of course, the majority have experience. The majority have been ministers, even those ministers who are coming into cabinet, the likes of Penny Henare, the likes of Willie Jackson, they do have that ministerial experience already, as does Mika Whaitiri. So a number of those already have that experience. They are now being elevated into a cabinet team. What I will say is that, on the decision, for instance, to bring straight in Kiri Tapu Allen, Dr. Aisha Verrill, my view is that we have to always make use of the talent we have. We have extraordinary talent in this caucus, and I believe that alongside the experience, we've got the right mix.
Is it fair to throw someone like that?
Yeah, sorry.
Is it fair to throw someone like that into the deep end?
Who?
Like Dr. Aisha Verrill, going from not even a member of parliament to being inside.
It's not without precedence. We've seen it before. Margaret Wilson came directly in. Stephen Joyce came directly in. My view is if you're a country in the middle of a global pandemic and you have a doctor in infectious diseases, it would be wrong not to use that talent. My view also is that the best way to add value was around the cabinet table. I didn't want to see a consultative role. I wanted a direct role for someone who can make an enormous difference to our response.
Mika Whaitiri returns to the executive. Are you confident she's learned from her past mistakes?
Yes. She would not be returning if I wasn't confident. Mika has done everything that I asked, and I've always said that there was a place for Mika, and ultimately there should be a place for second chances when people make an enormous effort, as Mika has.
You were Nash disappointed to lose the police portfolio?
No, I mean, actually, he of course retains a real passion for that area, but equally what he had to weigh that up against was his desire to enter into other areas that were equally passion projects for him. The area of Minister for Economic and Regional Development is huge. Stuart brings enormous talent with him. I want him to have the ability to focus across what is now tourism, forestry, small business and economic development, and together those portfolios make a lot of sense.
His decision to move from police into that new portfolio?
Yeah, well, ultimately, yes. Well, he had, of course, areas of interest, and he knew that he couldn't do everything. And so his primary desire was to, of course, work in regional and economic development. I supported him in that. He knew it was just too significant to hold everything and that something would need to give. And so a number of portfolios I've had to reallocate out of necessity.
So
I have to say though, you know, for me a very deliberate decision as well to have Porter Williams in the police role. Porter brings with her experience working across, in particular, family and sexual violence. She's of course had experience working alongside the New Zealand Police within the system there. I think having that background experience in that area will also be enormously beneficial to the police and to us.
Minister, would you like to achieve this diversity within your cabinet?
I'll come to Bernard Tober and then I'll come back. Yep.
Prime Minister, what do you want your cabinet to achieve to accelerate the government's actions before Christmas?
Yeah, and I'll actually be taking the opportunity later in this week to give a specific range of areas where we will want to advance both legislation and policy before Christmas. You will see that they are primarily focused on those immediate economic recovery needs in our COVID response, but it won't be singularly focused on that. Of course, if people are looking to the areas it's likely to be focused on, you need only look at our 5-point plan for our economic recovery.
Minister, are you doing enough with David Parker? He was one of the only ministers who's been a minister in another government. And he's losing.
Am I doing enough?
Revenue, which is not a huge policy platform for you ever.
Well, look, he is Attorney General. He is our Minister for the Environment, and we're about to undertake the most significant RMA reforms in decades. He'll also hold responsibility, because we've taken this back into his portfolio, for all of the work that we do on waste, which will be a significant platform for the Labour government over the next term. He also now has responsibility for oceans and fisheries, which we have also a significant agenda. And of course, as I said, he's got revenue. I don't think it would be fair to overload David Parker with any more than that significant raft. Sorry?
Did he ask for anything else?
He has primarily got the portfolios that he was interested in. And again, you know, these are significant areas. And of course, we're continuing with the water work as well. So I think it would be unfair to ask some of our ministers to do too much more than what they have. You'll also see that David Parker has moved up as well.
There's a lot of representation from the LGBTQ community, Maori, Pacific women. Is this, in your view, New Zealand's most diverse cabinet in history?
It is both a cabinet with huge merit and talent, who also happen to be incredibly diverse. You know, and I think that's an important point to make. You know, these are individuals who have been promoted for what they bring to this cabinet. They also reflect the New Zealand that elected them. And I think as a country we should be proud of that.
Joe? Did you give any thought to actually just scrapping that racing portfolio and wrapping it into the sports stuff?
So, you know, there's obviously at this point in time, it's held by both the Minister of Sports, Recreation, and so, you know, yes, it makes sense that it's held by that minister, but it's not always held by the same minister. If you roll it in, it's not necessarily the case that it will always follow that same portfolio holder. I think it's important to also note that there are some significant issues in that sector that we're trying to work through. I wouldn't want to give the impression that we don't still recognise those areas that we need to work on with the industry.
Would you have liked to have
Toby,
achieved...
and then I'll come back over to Maori TV.
Would you have liked to have achieved this diversity in your cabinet sooner under your leadership?
Yeah, I think you would have heard me say in my first lineup 3 years ago that, you know, one of the things that I wanted to see was that given we had in that election real diversity, particularly a significant increase in the number of women coming through, that I expected that to then flow on over time into other roles, and it is. What I always make sure, though, is that we're giving enough space for people to have a bit of experience as well, keeping and taking into account the talent that they already bring into the fold already.
Karen, what are your expectations of Willie Jackson, particularly in the Maori broadcasting area?
Obviously, in the Māori development space, that of course brings in with it the broadcasting area. You know, that's an area where, of course, you know, over the years, Willie does bring extraordinary knowledge and experience within the sector. So I imagine that that will, you know, only be helpful as we continue some of the conversations with the sector around the future of Māori broadcasting. Our focus remains the same. We want to see a strengthened Māori broadcasting sector. And that will be Willie's focus as well.
Derek. Did Kieran McAnulty not want to be part of the
Kieran is fantastic. There is no question for us that he is one of our great talents in our caucus. We have 64 members. I needed a very strong, experienced, seasoned whip to be able to take that caucus through. You will see, though, from the way I've used the whips, that they are often the ones that are on a trajectory. That was the case for Michael Wood. I have no question that will be the case for Kieran as well.
Not want to be part of the executive this term?
Oh, look, I'd say that actually every member of the caucus wishes to be a contributing member of the executive. And so that's across the board. Why are MPs here unless they want to give the biggest contribution they can? But I have to say, Kieran is such a team player. He essentially said he'd do whatever was going to be the most useful to the team. And at this point, the job of whip is a very big job.
Minister, what happens to the urban development portfolio? Does that just get rolled back under housing?
Yes, so obviously there are some specific responsibilities that do exist within environment in that area, but also exist within housing. It is my intention that they are rolled back into those respective areas.
Is it meaningful, Miss?
Yes, sorry, Jenna, you had a question.
That's all right.
Yep.
Is it meaningful that New Zealand has its first openly LGBTI Deputy Prime Minister, and why did you pick Grant for that role?
Well, obviously, for me, I'm always looking for both the leadership within the team and externally. And that's why I do want to start, though, by acknowledging the role that Calvin has played for us and will continue to play for us. Much of the role that Calvin plays, not every one of you will see, but I see, and it's of enormous value to me. Grant, taking on the new role of Deputy Prime Minister, I expect will be placing a very heavy emphasis in his job and the leadership of our economic recovery team. And that's why we've also coupled in the infrastructure role so that he can focus on the overall agenda in that space, because it is enormous. We will be very focused on making sure projects are rolling out the door as we expect and in a timely way. Yes.
Consider putting a Maori person in?
Oh, your other question, forgive me. I'll answer yours and then come back to your second question, Ben.
Did you consider putting a Maori person in the Deputy PM role, given Calvin wasn't keen on taking it?
So look, for me it was then about making sure that in the totality of our lineup within Cabinet, I'm equally mindful of making sure that we're using our talent in significant portfolios as well. And so that's one of my other considerations. But ultimately, I'd like to think that within this lineup, you can see that I'm playing to people's strengths and using what I've seen sitting in close proximity to this team. And you can see that in the allocation of portfolios as well. Your question about the LGBT, I think one of the amazing things about New Zealand is that we are often in a space now where all of these questions often become secondary. The representation is there. And that is not the first consideration. That is not how often our members first and foremost identify themselves. And so this is a cabinet and an executive that is based on merit, who also happen to be incredibly diverse, and I'm proud of that.
Did you offer anyone, other than Calvin Davis in the deputy role, did you offer anyone a job that they said no to?
No, look, there are certainly jobs that people have preferences for, but the remarkable thing about going through this process is that the vast majority of people will say, whatever it is you need, I'll do it. And that's a demonstration that each of us recognise we're privileged to be here. There's a job to be done, and we're all members of a team that need to crack on with it. And so that's, for the most part, that's the attitude everyone brings. Very humble, here in service, and to do whatever job is required.
What do you expect Māori health outcomes to look like with Penny Hinari's focus on Māori health?
Yeah, and look, for me, that actually, the Māori health area, of course, that's incredibly cross-cutting, because we need to make sure that we are, across the board, seeing better outcomes for Māori, whether it's in cancer care and treatment, whether it's in outcomes around diabetes. It is across the board. So what we'll need to carefully design is a way that Penny, of course, can have that constant input into our wider health system, not least as we move through our health reforms. It will be a critical role to make sure we get the design of that right for Māori and everyone.
get to the end of this term and you look back at it, how are you going to say, yes, Penny, you did a good job? What does a good job look like for Māori health?
First and foremost, it will mean acknowledging where the system hasn't worked, redesigning it so it works for Māori. I'm not going to create the bar for him that in just 3 years he'll be able to turn around every Māori health stat that we're underperforming in now. But we've got to make the changes that acknowledge where we have failed and give us the best chance of getting equity in our health system.
Now that you've got your cabinet together, now that you've got your cabinet together, what's your sort of plan for the next, towards the end of the year in terms of your legislative programme and the first things you want to do?
Look, so for the remainder of the week, I'll be setting out some of that legislative agenda on Thursday and some of the focus just taking us through to the end of the year. I understand that midweek, people's attention may be elsewhere briefly outside of New Zealand for a time. Friday, we'll of course have the swearing in of the new executive. We'll be cracking straight into a cabinet meeting that afternoon, and I'll be updating you on some of any outcomes from that immediately after on Friday. We'll then of course move through this commission and state opening of Parliament. We do have some legislation we need to get through before the end of the year, and again, as I say, I'll set out some of that on Thursday. But much of what we're focused on is making sure that we've got our economic recovery hastened, that we're continuing to tighten up every element of our health response, that we have that COVID focus people expect us to have, whilst also looking to what the future looks like for New Zealand. Gina?
Was it intentional to have all of those justice portfolios be given to Māori and Pacifica ministers?
No, my focus was just best person for the job. Of course, Poto, as I've said, I looked to that background that she had working in the spaces that often there is significant crossover with the police, and was also mindful of just the relationship there, and she is someone who works incredibly well on areas where we may or may not be working on culture change and so on. So that was a focus for me. Chris Farfoy, he will be covering areas like potentially electoral reform. He is a relationship builder. I expect that he will need to work across the House, so that was top of my mind in some of that allocation. And of course, Marama Davidson has a role in the team, and I expect that all of those individuals will work really well together, including Calvin with his Oranga Tamariki role. So for me, I look at the totality, and I think as a team they'll be great. But no, that wasn't part of my criteria.
We've seen demotions today.
Yeah, Mikey.
We've seen demotions today for those ministers who weren't delivering. Should that be a warning to those coming through, those new ones?
Oh, look, I take a range of factors into consideration. Skills and experience in different areas, experience within Parliament. But I also take into account, the way individuals work with others, their ability to form personal relationships. It's not a singular checklist. For me, I'm looking at a person as a whole in terms of both their elevation and when and where I may choose to move them.
But should your ministers know that if they don't deliver, they will be gone?
They've always known that. That is something I've been clear on from the very outset, and it's a reminder I give all of our MPs. If they wish to succeed, we do have very high expectations, but that's because the New Zealand public does. Last one, Audrey.
When do you expect the delegations to be done for associates, and when will Parliament sit?
So I already have a very clear view on most of the delegations. I need to do a comparison around the way some of those have, some of the perhaps the smaller rats and mice that need to be worked through, and I like to do that with the portfolio holders. So that's why I wait until this point. Now that I can do that, we'll work through, they'll talk to their associates over the course of the coming days. I expect sometime within next week, we should be able to sign those off. In terms of Parliament, that's something that Chris Hipkins, as Leader of the House, is working through as we speak. And what we're mindful of course, we have to wait for the issue of the writ. Our negotiations have been quicker than last time, so there's some processes that need to happen before we can bring back Parliament.
One word, Prime Minister, how would you categorise this reshuffle?
Exciting. Thanks, everyone. Oh, we've now actually, I'll just... Look, I know that there was some interest in speaking with particularly our Maori team, and so they will be here and available for a joint press conference now. So Calvin, I just want to invite you and the rest of the team to come up. Otherwise, yes, other new ministers will be available. We'll work through some of the interviews for those on a case by case. Thanks, everyone.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ngā mihi whānui kia tātou. First of all, I'd like to thank all our Māori voters who put their trust in our Labour Māori caucus and this Labour government at the election this year. And I'm proud to stand here with my Māori colleagues who will be working hard for you this parliamentary term. We have 5 Māori ministers inside Cabinet, and including Marama Davidson, we have 2 Māori ministers out of Cabinet, as well as Rino Tirikatene as an Undersecretary. As well as having a strong Māori ministerial team, our wider team will also play leadership roles outside these ministerial ones. Across all of the portfolios, we collectively hold responsibilities for children, Māori education, Māori development, conservation, fisheries, foreign affairs, Māori health, defence and others. And I'm proud to lead our ministerial team. We have a lot of work to do over the next 3 years. Work that we will do together as a team for our people. We're all here, happy to take questions from anyone. If you ask a question, please say our name and the person will step forward.
Davis, would you have liked to have seen this level of Māori representation in Cabinet sooner?
Oh, look, we're very happy with the level of representation we have now. Obviously, Māoridom has been wanting representation for 160 odd years, so we're very pleased that this government and this Labour Party, I think with 5 Māori cabinet ministers in one party, I think that's a first ever, I think, and we're very proud to be part of that.
What should Māori voters take away from today?
That this government has the interests of Māoridom at heart. We are very proud to be here representing Māori, and as you can see, though, that our portfolios are very diverse. So we're part of a government that is also here for all New Zealanders, but we're also very happy with the role that we'll play in Māoridom. Kia ora, Eru.
Ia ho whakaro ki ngā kaipoti Māori mō koutou, mō tēnei whakatau.
Mō tēnei.
Mō tēnei whakatau.
Ki tāku nei hia kia kite ai te ao Māori, he tīma kaha no mātou o tēnei kāwanatanga, hei kōkiringia i ngā tino, ngā tini kaupapa e ngākau nui ana i te ao Māori.
Ngā kahurangi kia whakamutu atu i Oranga Tamariki, kia ha tau mo Oranga Tamariki?
Ko taku whiwhinga i tēnei tūranga, tētahi nāku i inoi ki te premier. He nui ngā mahi, kei mui a tātou, e mohi ana tātou, kua he ngā mahi o Oranga Tamariki i mua ake nei, kore taia tātou te haere tonu i te mea kei whiwhi aua hua kino ano. Nā reira tāku hia kia huri kōwaro i te ngā kaupapa whakahaere o Oranga Tamariki.
Ngā RNZ o Oranga Tamariki, ngā mahi he o Oranga Tamariki.
E kite ana tātou te tangohi ana ngā tamariki mai i ngā whānau, tō mātou hia kia mahi tahi ai te ao Māori, kia hanga tētahi huarahi whakamua.
Assessment of Oranga Tamariki. What is your assessment of Oranga Tamariki, and can we expect big change with you at the helm?
Well, look, I'm open to ideas and proposals from Māoridom. The one thing we know for sure is that if we keep doing the same things, we'll end up getting the same results, and that's unacceptable. So I'm taking nothing off the table. But can I just, first of all, I should have said this right at the very start, is acknowledge the fantastic work that Tracy Martin did in the previous government, and I hope to, build on the work that she has started.
A separate Māori agency?
Minister, have you watched the video of the uplift of?
Yes, I have, and I've also been keeping abreast of the what's coming out of the Waitangi Tribunal hearings, and those stories are stories that we don't want to be talking about in 10 years' time.
With greater Māori representation here, do you expect that to translate during the budget process as well and see a lot more targeted funding for Māori?
Well, in the last budget, we had some $900 million targeted specifically for Māori, the greatest targeted funding for Māori ever. And we hope to be able to build on the great work, but that we had in the last term. But budget decisions are decisions that we'll have to negotiate with the Finance Minister.
Now, Minister is actually right already at the moment in terms of, I guess, the negative statistics for Māori and how much targeted funding they receive.
I think all of us here would say we would love to get more for Māoridom, but those are conversations that we have to have with the Finance Minister.
A question for Nanaia Mahuta. It's fair to say that it's perhaps a surprise announcement for you to take on the Foreign Affairs portfolio. Why have you been given this job?
Well, first of all, can I reiterate the Prime Minister's comment that we're very proud to have such a diverse group of new ministers and ministers continuing in new roles because of merit and because of our ability to contribute. In terms of my own portfolio, I'm absolutely privileged to be able to lead the conversation in the foreign affairs space, because what we know more than ever before in a COVID context is that as a small country, we need to develop our relationships, remain committed to a multilateral rules-based trade system that works for New Zealand, and in a recovery context, we need to ensure that all the benefits are deepened to many more in our society, and the progressive trade agenda achieves that. Look, and I'm also pleased to be able to work alongside ministers like Damien O'Connor and have the experience of David Parker, who has made a huge contribution in this area.
How does it feel to be stepping into Winston Peters' shoes?
Oh, look, Winston in his own right has made a huge contribution, not only in foreign affairs, but across Parliament and many portfolios. What he's shown us is that if you can develop strong diplomatic relationships, notwithstanding the politics within their own country, New Zealand as a small country can forge a way forward where we continue to have those types of discussions in terms of the trade settings to improve benefits back to New Zealand, but also to develop our opportunities in other countries and other markets. One at a time.
Did you go to the PM wanting the Foreign Affairs role, or did she offer it to you kind of out of the blue?
Oh, look, like many other colleagues, we identified a number of areas of interest, and then the Prime Minister pondered on that and then came back to us around what she thought we could do to contribute to the broader aspirations of the government, and that's what she did. I have the privilege of retaining local government, supporting my colleague in Māori development, and leading foreign affairs.
What are your priorities for the Australia relationship, and do you see it as New Zealand's most important relationship?
Well, it's our closest neighbour, and there are many things that we have in common. So we want to ensure, as we understand in terms of our export market, Australia is an entry into the rest of the world, that we continue that strong relationship. But I'm getting my feet under the table. I expect to receive the bin this afternoon, but that close relationship with Australia will only continue to strengthen. We'll come over here too.
Ka pēhea tō whirinaki ki au tikanga Māori hei āwhina i aku I roto I rā mahi.
Yeah, well, ko ki te mai te toko maha o ngā tāngata, ko uru mai I te kāhui kāwanatanga me ngā tirohanga Māori. Nō reira, ko au tētihi, hei hari atu tērā tirohanga ki tēnei tūranga hau. Kāre he kore he wāhanga anō ki te whakapakari a tērā wāhanga kei Wainganui a Foreign Affairs.
Tātai mā Willie Jackson. Pēhi o te kauro ki te whakakiki I waiwai ki te minita take Māori.
Mō tāna mahi a tāhu ngā tauko hipatu nei, nōku te honere, nōku te whiwhi I tēnei whakaritenga. Tika ana ki te hoki aku maumahara ki ngā rangatira o ngā wā o mua, pērā I a ngata, pērā I a parekura, Peter Sharples, e honere nui, ki te tautoko tēnei kaupapa.
Whakata Māori te karere ka aha koe.
Āta wā kā kōrera.
Ka reo I rangi Māori, ka pēhea.
Thank you. Because of the COVID context, do you expect that in the short term you'll be the first Foreign Affairs Minister who's not able to travel overseas?
Look, in the COVID context, what we've learned is that technology can continue to enhance our connectivity, not only within our country, but also in the global community. No one would have thought that we would hold an APEC conference with an online platform. So I think we've just got to use the best of what we have under the current context. I know that an important role that I have will be to strengthen and develop the relationships that are absolutely critical to us, both from a relationship point of view, but also from a trade point of view.
How big a priority will be the Pacific reset be for you?
Yeah, look, I expect that we will continue our commitment again to our closest neighbouring area and cousins in the Pacific, and the Pacific Reset is an area which I would like to work strongly with my associate on, and it's an area that we continue to give priority.
Minister, I mean, how do you...
I'll come here and then I'll go there.
Minister, how do you see China's more aggressive throwing its weight around in the Pacific and in Asia now?
Yeah, look, on many of the substantial issues, I'm still getting my feet under the table. I'm inheriting the portfolio from a predecessor who had views, and I'll form my views once I read the BIM and receive some advice. But what I can say is that New Zealand as a small country value the many relationships that we have across the globe, and will continue to work for the advantage of our country, our citizens, and certainly from a trading point of view, where we want to have a real impact in developing value and opportunity for our businesses. Well,
just on our relationship with Australia, how hard are you going to push them on deporting predominantly Maori Kiwis back to New Zealand?
Yeah, that's a conversation that I'll have alongside the Prime Minister. As she said, we'll work very closely on some of these very substantial issues. Some of those conversations have happened prior to me inheriting this portfolio, but no doubt they will be matters of priority as we determine our work plan going forward.
This is unfair.
Look, what I believe is that we need to continue to work in a way that ensures that the interests of New Zealanders are protected, that we retain the relationship that we have, the good relationship that we have with Australia, and anything further than that I'll be discussing closely with the Prime Minister. We'll come over to Mikey and then we'll come to the front to Joe.
Wondering if I could ask Mika a question, please.
So just quickly before we switch, if my memory serves me right, you were the first Māori woman to be Māori Development Minister as well, weren't you? So first again with Foreign Affairs?
Yeah, and it's a huge privilege, but I hope that when people reflect on a number of firsts of many women in this Parliament, it's the legacy that we've inherited. The first country to give women the right to vote, the first country to ensure that we are progressive on issues relating to women. So I follow in the line of a long legacy of firsts for women, and I hope that many other women of Māori descent, mixed descent across New Zealand will see this as lifting the ceiling once again on areas that have been very much closed to us in terms of professional opportunities.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Are you happy to be back?
Oh, look, I'm absolutely, honoured to get a call back and to be part of this amazing team. But I'm under no illusions about the enormous scrutiny, and I'm going to work every day to retain the confidence of the Prime Minister and particularly those voters of Ikaro Rāwhiti.
Are you disappointed that you didn't get Minister for Health as you asked for?
No, I'm not disappointed. I still hold an associate role for health. I'm part of a team, and the Prime Minister made it clear that for Māori matters relating to health, there's a big role for me there, and I look forward to doing my best.
Are you qualified to be the Minister of Defence?
Look, the Prime Minister in her introductory remarks talked about my whakapapa. My grandfather was the last commander of the Māori Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Sir James Henare. I have family, friends, and a strong association with the Defence Force, and I look forward to continuing in that role. Mahi a te mahi. Koe nā pēr tana kōrero ki au nei. Tino miharo ki te whai atu I wēnei tapu ai, ka mihi atu ki a Ron Mark. Nāna I whakarite ai te tūā papa mo ngā mahi o te ope kātua. Nō reira, he nui tonu ngā mahi kei mua iā, engari ka rekore, ka mene mai ngā mātua tūpuna.
Do you feel like Ron Mark's laid out the work for you for the next 3 years, or are you gonna take a different direction?
Just as I did then, I acknowledged Ron Mark for setting a really good foundation. The spending that this government, and the last government, has prepared for defence is unparalleled, and I'm looking forward to continuing the work while also having a strong Labour focus. Where the country gave us a mandate, and the Prime Minister was clear to me to make sure I lean in on the role as Minister for Defence.
From this government, or has it all been allocated?
Oh, look, Ron did really well in the last government, and as my colleague Kelvin Davis has already said those negotiations will happen in due course.
Labour focus in defence look like? What does the Labour focus in defence look like as opposed to the previous government?
Well, look, we've made it clear in the support of the work that Ron Mark did to set a foundation for defence. As coming in as the new Minister for Defence, I'm looking forward to working not just with the Defence Force themselves, but also with my colleagues here, and we present as a team, and same with my other Cabinet colleagues, to make sure that a strong Labour focus on defence is present.
What does that mean?
Well, that's the work that we've got to do. It was clear that in the last 3 years, Ron Mark did a great job at setting a journey for defence and the Defence Forces, and we supported that as the lead party in the coalition. So I can't imagine it would stray too far from the work that's already been done, but we look forward to having our focus.
Tētahi ope Māori roto I te ope kātua, hei whakamaumahara ki te rua te kaumāwara. Ne?
Ai, kāre kore. E mōhio ana koe ko te nuinga o ngā hoia me ngā here mana katoa ki roto I te ope kātua he Māori. Nō reira, kāre kore I tēnei wātonu ka aro atu te titiro me te maumahara ki te pakanga tuarua o te ao. Aine ka whakanuia e mātou o te motu whānui I te tū o te iwi Māori ki roto I te pakanga tuarua. Nō reira, kāre kore, karapuhi e tētahi atu huarahi kei mui a tātou.
Tungia he ope pēna, he ope hau pēna?
Ka wai hona atu mā tātou e whiriwhiri, me kaua tātou e mea nei te kōrero o ngā mātua tūpuna kia karanga mate, ne? Kia whakarite hia I tētahi ope mo te kore noiho. Nō reira, ka noho mātou ki te ata tiro, ka pēhia ki roto I ngā tau e toru.
Your associate roles as health and housing, you're now charged with facing probably two of the biggest problems facing Māori and poverty within Māori. How are you going to tackle those two, and can you get anything done in the next 3 years?
Well, we made it clear that for Māori health in particular, there's an opportunity here for an individual Māori health authority, and we believe that it will go some way to better serving the Māori people of this country. But having said that, I've made it clear, and we did during the campaign, that actually the institutional racism that exists for Māori exists throughout the entire health system. Simply developing an individual Māori health authority won't solve those. So we've got a large piece of work in front of us to do both the authority while continuing to push for strong equity for Māori across the entire portfolio as the Prime Minister described.
Do you think tackling some of that housing stuff might help?
Pardon, sorry?
Should the Māori Health Authority have commissioning powers?
Oh, look, we made it clear that in the build-up to the election that we are committed to a Māori Health Authority. The devil is in the detail. We made it clear that, as I said, it's good to have an individual Māori Health Authority, but we want these inequities addressed across the entire health system. So we'll be looking at how best we do that. Obviously, for whānau ora, commissioning works, but for health, we'll explore the opportunities.
How big of a threat is climate change, and how big of an issue is that for your defence, your outlook on defence?
As I said earlier, Ron Mark did some good work working together with James Shaw and a number of other ministers, Minister Parker, on that. Of course, the defence will take a role in whatever needs to happen in terms of climate control. We've already in the last government embarked on purchasing another vessel to make sure that we're able to better patrol and police our waters as we are required to. As former Minister for Civil Defence, and I want to acknowledge Kiri Tapualan because she'll have a fantastic opportunity there. They work closely with Defence. We did so in COVID, and I feel that I'm at least well equipped to make sure that we acknowledge the climate control.
We're going to take a few more questions and then we're going to wind it up. So if you've got something for other ministers, I suggest you ask them.
Can we borrow you, please?
Don't ask me any hard questions. It's my first day on the job.
You won your seat and now you're a minister. It's a big few weeks for you.
Yeah, it's actually felt like an incredible just whirlwind, and I just want to acknowledge my colleagues here and being a part of a team that has really put a spotlight on our regions. We represent pretty much all 4 winds of Aotearoa, putting a spotlight on our food production, our primary food producers, our taiao, amongst this group that are stand mugs here, but also amongst our entire team. It just feels like a real huge honour and a privilege, to be honest.
Been in Parliament for very long. Why do you think you were chosen ahead of other colleagues?
I actually had to answer this question earlier, and I said, I don't know. But I think, look, all I can say is that, yeah, look, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, particularly in my portfolio with conservation. I want to just take the opportunity to acknowledge the incredible work of the Honourable Eugenie Sage. I had a constituent just yesterday talk and post about how she had been one of the greatest ministers for conservation, and there was a lot of respect held for her. And I'm looking forward to putting my own imprint on that portfolio, particularly with a real focus on the relationships between Maori. Obviously, that portfolio holds almost 40% of New Zealand's land holdings. So there's an incredible opportunity for relationships to be built and enhanced, and I'm looking forward to the next steps of this journey.
Why are you the right fit for that portfolio?
Oh, look, I think, why not? Yeah, as my colleague said. I think I've had throughout my legal career, had a strong investment in environmental law, resource management and the like. Have been a strong advocate for the taiao, our environment, for many generations. And like I just referred to prior, the Conservation Act has some of our strongest treaty provisions in that, entrenched into that legislation. And there is a real growing component of hapu whānau iwi entering into relationships with the Crown that are really tied onto those treaty provisions and relationships, which do need to be developed and grown. So,
Farmers?
do I like farmers? Well, yes, I come from a strong background of farming and horticulture, so yes, I do. I do have a strong relationship with the rural sector, and I think that that's really critical in this role as well. The ability to reach out across the divide and bring whether it's the rural communities, our agricultural communities, Maori, etc., on board, and because there's a lot of work to be done within this.
Those relationships between the conservation sector and Māori, what sort of areas do you think would that pertain to? Is it stuff like greater recognition of stewardship or customary rights? And stuff like
There's
that?
a really great example, and I again want to acknowledge the work of the Honourable Eugenie Sage for advancing this piece of work, but up in the Raukumara range, there is a really unique relationships between, for example, Te Whānau Apanui, Ngāti Porou, the Crown, in terms of returning or rehabilitating that conservation estate back to its full capacity and potential, and that takes relationships across the board. We've seen examples down in Ngai Tūhoe with Te Urewera and the range there. There's a written into legislation, there's a devolving relationship of power. So it's giving life to those types of expressions of that relationship and allowing it to grow.
We've got a couple of more moments for questions for those who haven't asked questions through, and then that's it. Good point.
How much are you going to rely on tō Māoritanga, au tikanga Māori, kia āwhina koe, kia tuitui, so that you can create and form those relationships?
I think all of us would say that that's fundamental to our identity, so it serves as a starting point.
Briefly for Calvin Davis, you no longer hold the tourism portfolio, which is a significant employer of Pacific and Maori. What are your words of wisdom to Stuart Nash in taking on that portfolio, and why do you no longer have it?
Well, I think Stuart's going to make a fantastic job of the tourism portfolio, and you know, he'll stamp his own imprint on it. In terms of the work that was achieved in the last term, I think it needs to be acknowledged that we broke the back of responsible camping problems. We introduced the international visitor levy, the Tiaki promise, the new tourism strategy, which has survived COVID. The Chinese numbers were looking up in February this year. I think there was a 15% increase in forward bookings, and then of course COVID happened. The $400 million tourism recovery fund has got out the door. And not everybody is happy with it, and fair enough, but I think Stuart now is going to, you know, the portfolio is his, and I think he'll do a fantastic job.
Will there still be a tourism recovery minister group? Will the tourism recovery minister group still stand?
Well, that's a question for Stuart Nash to answer.
Were you as upfront with voters as possible about turning down that Deputy Prime Minister role and soon enough?
Oh, look, it's something that I'd discussed with the Prime Minister. She said it was clearly a decision I had to make on my own and to wait until after the election. The election has been, and you know, it's a decision that I've decided in the best interest of me. Like I've said, I have come into politics for two reasons, to represent Te Tai Tokerau and also to improve the lives of Māoridom, and I think that I can do it. I do want to say that I think Jacinda and Grant are the dream team, that they will work fantastically together, and they've got my 100% support.
On that, the only... Could you have been more upfront with voters about your
Well,
intentions?
I don't know entirely that it was a question that I was asked. And, we had to wait for the outcome of the election. We didn't know who was going to be the parties that were still standing. So it was, it was a lot of speculation and what-ifs at that stage.
As most senior Māori, the only I know Tamati Coffee is a present on the stage today, and hasn't been done very well in the reshuffle. Are you confident that you can pull off Waireiki on the specials, or have you given up on that seat?
Oh, look, the voters will, have the final say. Tamati is a great MP who's put a lot of effort into Waiariki. At this stage, it hasn't gone his way. We must acknowledge Rawiri Waititi for the efforts that he put in. But, this is politics, and, you win some, some you don't win. And we hope that the numbers come his way, but ultimately he's still here in Parliament, and he'll do a fantastic job representing constituents regardless.
Should Tamati himself perhaps show as much graciousness as you have now and at least acknowledge Rawiri Waititi at the moment?
I think we all acknowledge Rawiri, including Tamati. Yeah. Beg your pardon?
Refusing to concede.
Well, the final votes will be known, I think, this Friday, and it'll be what it'll be. But like I say, Tamati is here in Parliament. He will continue to do the best he can for our Māori people.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Te pātai kia koe mo te whakaata Māori. E rangi ki hai koe ki i kōrero pēra.
Hei, Amuria.